Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today for another one of our Ask an Expert webinars. And this webinar will be CEU eligible for our NAPO and NASM members that are attending. Remember to submit your code words to my email to get your certificate. I would love to also remind everybody that you are welcome to put questions into the chat whenever you want. We will answer those at the end. Now, without much further ado, I would love to introduce Barry Gordon of Gordon's Downsizing and Estate Services, and he will be talking about the practical guide to selling assets, downsizing, and estate management. So Barry, I'm going to let you take it away.
All righty. Thanks very much, Heather. And that's terrific. Happy to visit with everyone today. Thanks for coming out. The other thing I'd say about the chat is if there's questions that get in there that we don't get a chance to get to, we'll try to keep track of that and get back to you with an email or something later if we know who you are. So I think the Zoom will allow us to help figure them out. We can answer the questions to everybody. So great. Thanks very much. This particular slide to welcome you is just kind of a stark reality that lots of times when people have things to sell, they're not quite ready for the auction crew or anybody to show up yet because there's a whole lot of things to do in the room. So I just want to give you one stark little nudge that is often what people to see. And there may be many move managers as Heather had mentioned, there may be move manager organizers and resellers on the webinar as well as individuals. And so for the public, I'm hoping you'll find it really interesting, and for downsizers and for downsizing homeowners, of course. And then we're going to tell you some options at the end. If you're really interested in the subject matter, I'm going to give you an option at the end to something that you can sign up for if you're interested. But for the moment, let's just get through what we're up to today. And I just need to figure out how to advance my slide. And I think it might be here. There it is. Okay, so what we're going to through today is an introduction here quickly. A bit of an overview is going to be appraisal definitions. I'm going to talk a little bit about value in that sense, practical tips, evolution, current options, goals, kind of where the business has come and gone, where it is now, what the options are, and expectation setting, because that is important for everybody as we go forward. So intro for me, I've had several decades in selling assets and seeing the evolution of downsizing and estate settlement in North America and the tangible and the intangible elements of dealing with the chattels. And we appreciate you taking the time to come out today. So thank you very much. We appreciate the chance to talk to you, and we hope that you learn something from it. You get something valuable here. You got questions. We've talked about the chat already. Caesar's got a little poll there that he's going to launch. And it's just really, this is what we want to know is if you consider yourself an individual or if you consider yourself a partner / reseller or somebody that's basically in the business of moving chattels for other people. Just fill out that if you don't mind quickly. And we just want to get a sense of who we're talking to so that I can lean toward those things and speak to some of those issues as we go forward.
And while they're answering that, I will just put out the code word. So I'll do the first one, downsizing. So then you don't have to worry about it, Barry. I'll throw one in the middle at the end. So the first one's downsizing, and I'll put it in the chat.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather, for keeping us on track with that. All right. Okay, so while the poll is going on, go ahead and fill that out. Cesar can close it when he feels like he's got enough momentum there. So the seller is really about setting expectations for you if you're considering the sale of items, or for intermediaries if you're selling things for other people. So these are the kind of things that we want to talk about. So in my experience, folks, there's a line that we all need to know where it is, all right? The items in an estate, while small in monetary comparison to the sale of a house or a cottage or a condominium, are often small things, but they can leave the wounds and the emotional trauma, okay? So having some understanding of the issues that we're going to talk about today is going to help everyone, I think, through the situation with more satisfaction all around. And of course, we've talked about questions there. So who is this seminar for? Okay, it's for people that are downsizing or planning to downsize, okay, offspring or supporters of people who are downsizing, because lots of times downsizing involves more than just the individual. Most of my clients that are downsizing, they're probably somewhere between 75 and 95, lots of them kind of in the middle, but many of them have some support coming from somewhere. It may not be living in the same town or the same house, but they're people that are concerned and helpful. So you may be someone in that position today as well. Also, we're going to talk to people that are selling estates, executors and beneficiaries, and touch on some of those issues. Those are going to be selling goods for others who are planning to be doing so, and resellers who are considering that kind of an event sale as well. And I say an event sale because that's the context of online auction, and that's really where we're going to wrap up to. You can put that pull away if it's not okay. And so some of what we're going to cover here is we're going to touch on appraisals, practical tips, various ways to sell items, and how MaxSold fits into the picture and what to expect. So the goal here is for you to understand the landscape of valuation and expectation. All right. So just a couple of things about appraisals. So there are different kinds of appraisal certification organizations in North America, and here are just a few. If you're curious about getting into the appraisal business, or you're curious about what appraisal designations are, we got ISA, okay, the Canadian Personal Property Appraisers Group, which is really the only purely Canadian personal property appraisers group, and they run courses about 3 times a year. And then ASA. So you got ISA, ASA, and CPPAG, which is the Canadian version. So all of those are examples. They're not the only ones, but that's kind of a pretty good overview of the space for personal property stuff for a lot of people. So just keep those in the back of your mind. I'm going to touch for a minute on appraisal definitions. So a lot of times when people ask, can I have an appraisal of this thing or that thing or the other thing? It depends. The appraisal that they're looking for depends on what their situation is. What do they need it for, right? Okay, so the broad definitions, we call them fair market value, replacement value, and auction market value. And by the way, all of the slides of pictures in here are things that have sold through MaxSold at one point or another. And well, there's a few slides from the early days, but let's say 95% are items that are sold through MaxSold. And so just to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that you can sell a lot of different kinds of things. So we got a lot of diversity. And again, if you stay to the end, if you're really curious, we'll talk more about these things. So first of all, fair market value. So the fair market value definition, you don't need to read the whole thing, but this is kind of the thing that's cast more like a real estate definition of value. It talks about, you know, a willing buyer and a willing seller and agreeing on a price, and that's fine. It's a fine definition. It's just not so practical if the context is I need to sell everything in my house and I want to know what I might be able to get for it. We'll talk about that one in a minute. This one might be good if you've got some key high-end paintings or something that have a global market and you want to know how much are those things going to be estimated for if I were to sell them in that kind of venue today. And so that might be something like Waddington's for those in Canada, and many great auction houses in the US where they'll take a reserve and they'll sell a single item. And, you know, it was estimated at 18 to 23,000, and maybe they've got a reserve of 15,000. And so that's the evidence around that stuff. Fair market value is framed as willing buyer, willing seller, you know, but if there's 100 different items, that's the challenge, right? So value becomes more guided by what it can be practically sold for. So most of the folks that are asking about having an auction and what's my stuff, like we had a conversation with someone the other day called and said, hey, I want to get an appraisal done. Okay, well, what do you want an appraisal for? Well, it's an estate. Okay, so you know, here's a different version of how we can go with an estate. No, I want a, you know, a full proper fair market value for my estate. Great. She thinks she's going to use it as a guide to sell stuff. Well, she's going to have a hard time selling things individually based on a fair market value appraisal. Not to say you can't, but it's a challenge for an individual without a professional to be able to get some of that kind of stuff done. So practical is different depending on the circumstances. And remember that actual recorded sales of things are the evidence that goes into the next appraisal. So if you think of it in the context of a house, when a house is sold, that sale becomes part of the market evidence. So the next time the next door neighbor's house is coming up for sale, they're going to be looking at that evidence of the sold property to help predict what the next one will bring. So that's kind of what appraisal is really about. Replacement value is another common term, and replacement value really is an insurance value, right? It's It's what happens if my item disappeared and I needed to replace it. And that's the context around that. Okay. And then it takes the view that the item's not for sale. If it's stolen or damaged, and like I had my vehicle stolen out of my driveway, one time, then they come and they appraise it and they say, hey, this is what the value of it is. You didn't intend to sell it. And, we're going to settle for you. Sometimes there are elements of that item that are unique and difficult to replace. However, I just wanted to put this coin down as a marker. So this is a little gold maple leaf coin. It's worth a little around $3,000. I haven't checked the gold price today, but let's call it $3,000. So in something like this, then fair market value and replacement value might be exactly the same thing because it's like a commodity, right? The price changes every single day. So most things that you're going to have in an insurance or replacement value are things that are going to have a strong value because that is often much different than fair market value because it's imagining what could I get if I didn't want to sell this if it was stolen. And then there's this thing we call auction market value. So in an auction market value, there's a lot of nuance in this definition, which speaks to practical circumstances with an auction tone. Okay. So in the middle of this, you'll see things like the ability of the asset group to draw sufficient prospective buyers and ensure competitive offers are considered. All assets to be sold on a piecemeal basis as is, with purchasers responsible for the removal of the assets. So you can see that these things affect value because what you're imagining with auction market value is you're imagining that there's a bunch of stuff to sell and there's a finite time to sell it. And the seller really needs to clear those items. And so it's not a situation where the seller is negotiating with a buyer and saying, hey, willing buyer, willing seller. In an auction scenario, typically the goal is clear the stuff. And so the willing seller is a seller who's willing to let the buying marketplace decide what those items are going to bring. And that's what we'll talk about as we go through today. So practical sale value. For most of it, it's what we're going to be able to get for the item. Okay. So I tell my clients that appraisals are wrong almost all the time. And the measure of how far wrong they are is the difference between what they were appraised for and what they actually sold for, because the market is real evidence. Now, you could argue from time to time that, well, it wasn't a good day, there wasn't enough people, whatever. But listen, a marketplace, these days, marketplaces are pretty robust. It's something certainly like MaxSold as an example, it is a marketplace where, I mean, if the items can be understood, they can be seen, they're accessible, they're going to, generally speaking, they're going to sell for a fair price, particularly in the context of that item and everything else that I had to sell that day. So some practical tips we'll talk about for selling extra goods when downsizing or selling an estate. Understand first, okay, why you might be selling things. The context is really important, deciding how you want to sell. Okay. If you're downsizing, you can't take things with you, then they kind of have to go somewhere. I had a lady call me the other day and she said, look at Barry, my piano was appraised at my baby grand piano was appraised at $3,500. Can I have a reserve bid on it? Or can we, how do we sell that if I was going to use MaxSold? And I said, look, MaxSold sells lots of pianos. They bring what they bring. If you've got an alternative, if you feel like paying to get it taken apart, move to a storage place, a climate control storage place, just try to resell it yourself from there, paying the storage fees, maybe having it depreciate worse and with all the insurance issues and everything else. If you think that's an option for you, then maybe it is. But if you just really want to clear it with no more costs, then this is a good alternative. So she sold it in the auction that particular day. That auction, I think it brought $1,250 or $1,300, which was a fair price for it at the time. And she sold 180 other items in that same event. And collectively, it makes some sense. Okay. So it could be an estate. You don't need the item anymore. It could be an estate where someone's passed away and the estate requires settlement. People buy and sell for business and some for hobby. Okay. So more practical tips, consider the entirety and the individual items. So the entirety of things is everything that's there. So what happens a lot of times is an estate contents may be appraised at, let's say, $10,000. And within that $10,000, there's a $2,500 item. There's a $1,500 item. There's a $1,000 item. And then there's all of the rest of the items. Well, guess what? If you sell those three things, and let's say the rest of those things appraised at $5,500. with the big things out. If you take just the $5,500 worth of stuff to a MaxSold auction, then maybe you get 55, maybe you get 35. Because what happened was the event got to be a lot less interesting when you pulled those few things out. So keeping all those things together, in my books anyway, if I do an appraisal and I say it's going to bring $10,000, generally speaking, it's going to bring more than $10,000, but that's based on all of those things being in the sale. And I'm not here to sell appraisal services, by the way. So look at the highlights from some event auctions. We're going to look at them later and you'll see some of that. And we'll talk about auction amounts and then guaranteed sale amounts, which is just another conversation. So the volume of what you've got also may affect the sale. So practical tips. This is a situation. This is a real situation. This is a guy with a little bigger than average house. It was a bigger than average house. Like I would say maybe a 3,000 square foot house, not a 10,000 square foot house. So imagine a 3,000 square foot house. This guy had all of these clocks in his living room and he had them piled up on about 8 Persian rugs. So they're all kind of tippy because the layers of rug, because obviously he was a guy that was on the hoarder scale for sure, keeping stuff clean, but he had a whole lot of stuff. So when you have a whole lot of things, particularly when they're big and heavy and awkward, right? That's a lot of dilution in a single auction. But at the same time, if the mandate is get them sold, you got to get them sold. Practical tips again. Are you a fiduciary or are you acting for someone else? This is critical to know when you're going to sell stuff, because if you act for yourself, you only have liability for yourself. Okay. If you're acting for someone else, your responsibilities are different. So it's one thing for you to decide, I'm going to negotiate the sale of my John Deere lawnmower with my neighbor. But if it's an estate and you're the fiduciary, you're the estate trustee, and the neighbor wants to buy the lawnmower, in my opinion, you're a lot better leave that in the auction and let arm's length, let the bidding take place, because then you're off the hook. You have delegated that specific responsibility to a professional outlet to come to the value proposition, and any beneficiary would be able to bid on that situation as well. Okay. So if you're acting for someone else, your responsibilities are different. Okay. So you can decide if you want to sell your sterling silver to the dealer, but if you're fiduciary, you should be acting in this particular way. And frankly, if you just use this rule and say, listen, if it's extra and I need to get it sold because I need to move out, then all in one is going to give you the best result. So why is the other question, right? Why do people sell things? So depending on what you're selling, why you're selling it, your options are going to be different. This particular guy, I took this picture just because it was cute. This guy who was 95 or so that had this, and this was his household, but he won an award about 45 years ago from the National Poultry Association for the Hall of Fame or some specific award, because he had developed a way to feed chickens that made them more efficient than anything else. And so he had this award still. So that's why that cute little story. But so why are you going to sell? Okay. Do you have finite timelines? If you got floor space, if you got warehouses, you're thinking about moving it to a storage locker. Like these are the challenges. We were involved in a documentary that CBC did at one time. It's on GEM, available today, I think. It's called The Art of Downsizing. And there's 3 little vignettes and we're one of them. And so our customer is there. But one of the other vignettes, it talks about somebody who admits on the film that they had inherited several estates over the years, couldn't part with any of them, had spent about $500,000 in storage fees over the years. And now they were trying to figure out, is a big downsize and I need to clear some. I've personally seen people with over $300,000 in storage fees, and and then maybe about $2,500 of the stuff stored in that storage locker. So just think about that math for a minute. People talk about a lot of times, how do I get this much money for my item rather than whatever the market wants to bear? Well, I can tell you there are all things that are a lot worse than taking what the market will bear when you need to sell it or when it's time to sell it. So what you need to know for is what's your goal, right? What's your goal for selling things? Is it to get a lot of money? Is it to expose my stuff to the world? I made a note here, Anne from Mississauga. This is a cute story. 10 years ago, more, maybe 12 years ago, we had a lady in Mississauga and she had a whole bunch of paintings that she painted herself. And they were lovely, but you've seen lots of that over the years. You get a homemade artist and they do a nice job, but there was no notoriety. They didn't sell their paintings, etc. anyway, I went through this whole household and I looked at it and I said, you know what, Ann, your sale, I'm not sure it's a good idea for you to have a sale. And she said, well, why not? And I said, well, because the stuff that you want to sell is going to be worth way less than the cost to get it ready for sale. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. And she said, well, and her daughter was there. I said, look, you get if you got somebody else in the family, bring them in. You can rely on them to give you some advice along the way. And she said, okay. So the daughter's walking around with us and she says, hey, Mom, she said, do you hear what he's telling you? It's a bad idea. You shouldn't have an auction. This stuff is going to be worth way less than the cost of getting it ready. She said, well, she said, you know what? So what you're telling me is my worst case is I'm going to lose about this much money, but I'm probably going to get most of my stuff out of the house. I said, yeah, that's about right. And she says, yeah, I want to do it. And the daughter rolls her eyes, but nonetheless, we go ahead and we do it. And guess what? The stuff actually sold terrific and it brought more and she had net positive money. But I was talking to her after and I said, Ann, I said, why did you want to have an auction when I told you what that advice was? And she said, well, she said, you know what? I wanted to sell my paintings on the internet. I wanted everybody to have a chance to see them. And I wanted to be able to tell my friends at the retirement community that I sold them all on the internet. So know what the reason is. It makes a difference, right? And here, the last point here is a key point for a whole lot of people that are dealing with estates and downsize. The reason for this sale is to get the house empty for a new buyer, because if your house is $500,000 these days, there's lots of houses that are worth $1 million and $2 million, but any house these days is worth a lot more than the cost or the upside of those contents. And so that's the key, is most buyers of houses or people that want to buy houses don't want to buy them lock, stock, and barrel. And if they do, they're going to discount you a whole bunch. So you want to get it empty. These are things to think about in the brief history. Okay. So we're going to talk just quickly.
The
Sorry.
next code word is estate. I'll put it in the chat, estate.
State, that's the next code word. Thanks, Heather. And so we're just going to go through a quick evolution, and I won't spend a ton of time on this. I just want to show you some fun stuff where things have been. Okay. So there's a lot of ways to sell stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about some pros and cons, and we're going to talk a little bit about evolution and current options. So you kind of see where things are and where things have been. So over the past 50 years, context and evolution. Okay. This thing, by the way, is the equivalent of what an engine. And it's on a wood wagon. They would pull this out in the middle of the hayfield, and then they would start this thing up, and the belt drive would drive various kinds of old farm machinery at the time, stationary stuff like, thrashing machine or whatever. But in any case, that's something that we saw this year as well. We're going to just buzz through this stuff. Okay. Live auctions from the lawn, then a warehouse, then online from the warehouse, estate, tag sales, bulk sales. We're just going to touch on this range of things so you can kind of see where things were. Now, I've been around for a long time. Okay. So this is me many years ago in the early 80s. And, we're doing live auctions to settle rural estates and farm stuff. And this is an early consignment center. And so we built this, we had a livestock market when I was growing up. And I had a guy that had $100,000 herd of cows, and he wanted to sell them. And he said, Barry, he said, you can sell my cows, but you can't sell them if you don't have a nice place to sell them in. And at the time I said, okay, well, let's build a place that would be a nice place to sell your cows. And then let's have it if we can do the same thing and sell stuff in it as well. So we did. It made a dual purpose building. And there you can see a crowd of eager auction goers. If I remember correctly, it might've been on a Wednesday night about 6 o'clock. And then we moved from selling in an auction center like that we owned to renting locations. This is a third-party location for a high-end auction, so we held it there. And then sometimes we had the auction on the lawn. So to just show you where it's been, this is an auction in a small town, and that's the crowd that came out that day. And of course, people didn't have as many things to do at home. They weren't watching as much television. They weren't spending as much time on Facebook. Or other kinds of social media things. And so an auction was a real event, and that's what drew the people. So I saw a live auction picture from the early 80s. And then sometimes more commercial liquidations as well. So, and they were live auctions. So that's a feed mill. And everybody's going, the feed mill's closed, and we're selling off all the things that are around it. And the auctioneer's standing up. You can see her standing up just a little higher than the rest of the crowd, and everybody's bidding. And so we had to get these big tents out sometimes because there were big events. You imagine the logistics. So I know that a lot of you that are dealing with MaxSold and with online auctions, and you're thinking about selling contents of your house, you're thinking, well, you know what? It's going to take a lot to get my stuff ready for sale. And that can be the case. There are times, you saw that first slide, the beginning of the office, right? Some of these houses require a lot of work, and I'm going to show you just a little bit of that. But you think about what it was like in the 80s and 90s, right? You put up a 100-foot tent a day in advance or 2 days in advance. You get all that set up, you get all the stuff pulled out, and then you're dealing with all the sale of that stuff, and then people are picking it up and taking it with them when they go. So logistics have changed over the years, right? So current options for volume sellers. So keep this in mind, folks. Online auctions, like MaxSold as an example, are built to sell volume. Okay, that's the problem that they were built to solve, is to sell volume. And so here's a pro and con of the various kinds of current auctions that are out there today. We got consignment auctions, okay? We got live auctions. We got online auctions from the house or apartment. You got garage sales, estate sales, tag sales, you got consignment stores and bulk sales, okay? So these are all things that you may consider when you're talking about selling stuff. What I would tell you, this is just a place that we go to in St. Pete's Beach, Florida, called Deja Vu. It's a terrific store, by the way. But they're not really awesome solutions for volume sellers. You want to sell everything in your house, okay? Something like this isn't going to work because they work on a consignment commission. They've got an overhead, and they can only deal with the things that make sense from a value standpoint on an individual basis. Sometimes they'll take a couple of plain items with a whole bunch of really good items, but they're not taking out a whole house, okay? So do-it-yourself solutions is what we call these. Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, Craigslist, bulk sale. They've got a place in the market. They're really good, but they're not for volume sellers, really. So let's talk about goals and solutions, right? So what's my goal for the sale of my stuff? To get a lot of money, to expose myself to the world like Anne, right? To get my house empty. So if the goal is to meet my fiduciary duties or simply be fair to myself, and I accept that the net monetary contribution of the chattel's proceeds is going to make little difference in the lives of the beneficiaries, then an outstanding process that accomplishes everything, okay, is going to have the following features. So just think about that for a second, okay? If you think of yourself as a fiduciary, it helps you decide what's practical, right? And if you also can accept that my contents are just what they are, right? Whether they're 3,000 or they're 8,000 or they're 20,000 or they're 30,000 or they're 50,000, and some people have much more. But the net contribution isn't, if somebody's got $100,000 of the contents, folks, it's probably coming out of a $3 million house. Okay. So even in that context, the 100,000 is not change. It's not chump change, but it's not the big piece of the puzzle. The big piece is the $3 million house has to be empty so that the buyer can get it clear and empty at the time. And so you want to honor this stuff. You want to do well with this stuff, but it is what it is. Okay. So if those are the criteria, then here are the things that I think are key. Finite, so that it's over at the right time. Transparent, because you're a fiduciary. Safe, so stuff doesn't get stolen or broken. Competitive, so you're dealing with a third-party marketplace and you can rely on it. It's arm's length, okay? So people can bid from anywhere. And the other thing is people can watch from anywhere. It may not be practical because a lot of the auctions online in houses, most of them aren't ship auctions. If it's online from a house, that's not often a ship, although there is a little bit of exception to that. But people can watch from anywhere. So if you've got a niece in California and a nephew in New Jersey, and they want to watch the auction unfold, they can watch it unfold, right? If they want to bid on stuff themselves and tell grandma to just keep it and I'll get back up there next week and pick it up, no problem, okay? The solution would get something for everything. So one of the keys to an online auction from the house is that 95% of stuff gets sold, okay? And that means something brings everything, and therefore it accumulates. Even if it's $1 and it saves having this stuff, more energy and time put into carrying it away, then it's net positive, okay? A solution that keeps the maximum stuff out of the landfill. When I started in this process, right, of online auction, I can tell you, that the majority of professional intermediaries, move managers, professional organizers, 15 years ago, I can tell you this for a fact, 12 years ago, that if I asked a question in a room, what percentage of the stuff that's in the average house that you're handling today goes to waste or charity? And they would say 60 to 70%. Okay. And unfortunately, that's probably still true for some people today. But this online solution gets more stuff into people's hands. Sure, some things probably still need to go to waste or charity, but basically, from anything reasonably remotely saleable, 95% sells. It keeps the maximum landfill. It puts things back into the hands of others who can self-select and use them. So people need things, right? There's a whole lot of folks in different economic places in their life right now and opportunistic places in their life, and they need to get stuff as well. So, and there's a digital trail. Okay, so the digital trail, think about that. If I'm dealing with a client who has memory issues, okay, and we sell her teapot that she says go ahead and sell, and then 6 months later she starts telling her daughter that something was stolen, or teapot was stolen. If the daughter wants to check, and it came through us or it came through an online auction, there's a digital trail. You can find that again, okay? Which these days, sometimes you need proof to go along with some of that stuff, because memory issues are a big and growing issue among, people in society. Nothing accomplished these things, all of these things that I've just talked about, better than an online auction from the house, okay? And MaxSold was uniquely built to accomplish all of this, okay? So it's green, less to the waste. The expense of moving or packing is eliminated. However, there are handling costs, and those are important. Captures something for everything. 95% or more sold. It's arm's length. It's finite. So MaxSold was purpose built to do this. And I say MaxSold, and that's a brand. And yes, I know I'm talking to the choir here to some degree, but a lot of online auction sites, and there are some good ones. There are some many excellent professional auctioneers throughout North America, but their economics are typically chained to much higher value volumes or higher value individual items. And so clearing the average household and getting something for it is not on the list for a lot of those, right? But MaxSold was built to do that, so it's unique in that sense. So auction is the natural route, but MaxSold applies the most practical way. So it's easy for related parties to watch, safe, secure. Okay, so if this is the goal, and we've talked about all these things, are the items an obstacle to the end state? Okay, so now I'm just going to set the framework a little bit and tell you who I am, and then we'll go through a little bit more of this stuff and answer questions along the way as well. Okay, we'll make sure that we get to questions. So our company is an integrated real estate and transition company. So what we do is take on actually the sale of the house. We're a real estate company that deals with just people downsizing and estate executors. And so we give those folks that an option to have a one-stop shop. So the one-stop shop is, we'll look after the sale of your stuff. We'll look after your move. We'll get you settled. We'll get you packed, unpacked, bed made, pictures hung, clothes in the closet, boxes gone, get you settled in your new place. We'll ship things to relatives, clear that extra waste and charitable stuff, organize an online auction, sell all that stuff, get the house ready for sale and sell the house. And we're a 65-year-old company, and we just operate in Ontario. So that's just the framework. I want to tell you who we are and what we do. If you're interested in that, we can talk about it later. So let's get to expectation setting here a little wee bit. And I just want to see where, okay, so think back to the value discussion. You're talking about auction market value is the most practical lens for a lot of things. We're going to see what's likely in terms of sale of everything. In the context, of course, is the house that needs to be gone. I need to ask myself, who am I and what is my role? Am I of sound mind? Am I acting for myself? Am I doing all my own moving and packing? Am I acting for someone else? And what is the practical and monetary terms? And are there parties that I want to be able to facilitate their participation? Okay, so what is my situation? Am I a hoarder? Have I got a volume problem? Do I have a time crunch? Is there a time crisis? Is there a man-made crisis? And I should set my expectations in light of what a person like me would do in a situation like this. So this is an important question. We ask people, what would someone like you do in a situation like this? What would I do in a situation like this? And for all of the people that are advising an elder person who's thinking about downsizing, okay, I want you to think about this. So if you are a daughter or a son or a nephew, and you're advising someone who's older and they're trying to make this big shift and downsize from their house they've been in for a long time to an apartment or something, it's easy for all of us to say things like, well, this is what I would do if I were you. And that's not the best view. The best view is to try to put yourself in the position of that person and say, what would you do? Okay, I'm talking to a family right now that live in a small town, couple in their 90s, and the gentleman is the caregiver for his wife, who has significant dementia. Okay, it's significant, and she is slated for long-term care. He wants to move to a retirement community somewhere near where she's going to go, but he can't go where she's going to go. She needs to go to long-term care. Got a son and a daughter in two different geographies, not the town where they live in. And I'm talking to them all. And the dad, he's going like, Barry, I need you. Like, I need you, man. Like, let's get you on paper and let's make an agreement. Let's do something. And the son is like, Dad, like, we can do that. Me and my sister can do that. Well, she lives in another country. And I'll give you a little gender bias here. I can tell you that women more often than anybody else pick up the slack, right? She can't do it. So that means him. And in his case, too many times I've seen situations where someone in his position saying, hey, I can do it. Well, so here's what happened is we talked to them a few months ago. He talked his dad out of jumping in right away. The son and the daughter were both on vacation at a particular time. At that time, a call came in for his wife. She could move to a long-term care place right away. You got to be there in 2 days, but it's open for you. He has no ability to do it. The son talked them out of making an agreement with the people who could deliver because he said, we can look after it. And he wasn't there. So now they get reset on the clock. In Ontario, where they are, it's 3 months again. You have to sit off the list for 3 months before you can put your name back on the list. And I can tell you, like, it's a very tenuous situation. It's very nervous. These are the human elements that we're dealing with. So while we talk about the stuff, we talk about the value, we talk about recovery, the backdrop of all this is what's going on. So who am I and what am I going to be doing? What do I need, right? Okay, so who am I? The key question, right? We deal with different elements of this every day, every single day, folks. This is our client right here. This is just a picture of what houses don't look like for most of us, okay? So all of the professionals in the room watching the estate tonight are chuckling right now because they're looking and saying, yeah, for sure, I'd like a client like that once in a while. This is not what client houses look like typically. When people have lived to 80, 85, 90, 95 in a house, chances are some of the last period of time, they weren't able to keep up with stuff just exactly the way that they wanted to. And so it looks a little different. Okay. So here's just a few, and I know the professionals on the webinar today could show you thousands of slides just like this, but this is an example of the kinds of things that are actually out there and that we see often. Okay. And what I want you to think about with these things, I get a phone call from somebody that lives in a house like this, and they say, hey, what do you think it would cost me to move? Or what do you think it would cost me to get my stuff ready for sale? And the answer is, I can't tell without looking at it at least a little bit, right? Because I can tell you often the person who created this situation really doesn't see it this way. They don't see it as something that's really a big job. They think, oh, well, I live here and I've lived here for years and I enjoy it and I keep it tidy and this is my life, right? So there's a lot of these things that you find and you just got to go through. And here's another situation, right? So how often, and I just toss it out in the chat, you can say me, if it's you, how many professionals in the crowd have come into a house where the estate trustee says, yeah, my sister passed away, but before she passed away 10 years ago, she moved to this house. And when she moved, she brought too much stuff and she just never unpacked it. And so here it is in the basement. Well, now this job isn't 2 times as expensive to manage. It's probably 3 times as expensive because you're dealing now in a really finite amount of space and you're trying to make it work. And every professional knows that Small space, lots of stuff. That's hard. And that's one of the many reasons why moving stuff to a storage locker and then dealing with is awkward in many, many cases as well, unless it's premeditated and you go and organize it on the way in. This is some of that same lady, okay? Because before anyone begins to do the work, this is often what you're looking at, right? Sellers think they just got stuff, and even folks that have it tidy, right? So these drawers are really tidy, but there's a lot of volume in them, right? And you probably have to have a quick look to decide, is it all costume or is some of it real gold, right? And if some of it's real gold, you kind of want to know that, right? And volume again, and volume again, and volume again, right? So many people with so many boxes, right, of stuff. And it's all there for a reason. It was rational decisions. The other thing that contributes to this, okay, is when people get their house for sale before they have figured out the rest of the steps. That's what a lot of this is a product of, okay? People are, and you know, the real estate business, I mean, it's a big money business, and real estate agents want to sell houses, and they feel like, hey, if I sold your house and that's what you asked me to do, then we all win, right? You win because I sold your house, and I win because I got a commission. But not for people that are trying to accomplish this, right? It's a problem if they get their house on the market, because once they get their house on the market, if they're able to sell it, then there's a finite time bomb ticking, and that's called the closing date. And if you don't know where you're going, or you don't have the ability to get there, you're going to make some rash decisions. And a lot of those decisions are going to be things that resulted in this, because I can tell you that's what happened here. And that's what happens most of the time is somebody sold their house. They didn't have enough time to make some rational decisions, and boom, it's in the basement. 10 years later, two things. It cost 3 times as much to handle it, and it's worth half of as much as it was the day it went in. A couple other slides on this. Sometimes the estate, the person who's receiving the stuff, inheriting the stuff, has got a big yard, and they just say, hey, here's an idea. Why don't I buy, I don't want to pay storage fees. I get a better idea. I'm going to buy 3 sea cans. I'm going to put all the stuff from my mom's house in those sea cans. And then guess what? 10 years later, this person passes away, and now his sister's on deck, and she's got to deal with it all, right? So I just give you a quick looks here. So they had everything stacked full, even a tractor, right? You got a tractor and all this stuff. So it all has to come out so you can see what it is. Like what has to go to waste or charity or something, and what can be dealt with, and which things did the family want to see to make sure that they know if they're going to let go of it, right? Because lots of times there's family that legitimately are thinking like, hey man, I don't want to get rid of like important family memorabilia. So, you know, we got to go through it. So again, back to expectation setting, the economics are always a factor, right? But what are the practical economics? And handling things has a cost, okay? Everyone's got an early desire to understand value, but in many cases, the bigger thing to understand is cost. Unless you got an army of volunteers, and by the way, I don't think it's a great idea to assemble an army of 85-year-old volunteers either. And I've seen those, okay, the church group, because even if they think their time is free, it might turn out to be a lot more costly than that, right? Like, I mean, you know, we've all seen people slip and fall downstairs and all kinds of tragic things because they're trying to do stuff that they're not up to. And let me just throw in one more comment about estate executors, okay? A lot of times these days, we've got an estate trustee who's, you know, a solid senior themselves. You know, maybe they're 75 or 80 or 85 and they're the estate trustee and they're making the decisions. Well, here's what I think. I think that people that are named estate trustee or estate executor are named because the deceased, the testator, like the person who's gone, felt like they trusted their judgment. They thought they would have good judgment on the decisions that they made. And that's important. They probably didn't hire them or name them as the estate trustee because they felt like they could carry more than anybody else in the family. They probably didn't just pick the strongest person they knew who could carry the most stuff. They probably picked the person they thought was all in, best judgment. And so it's crazy with our lives. I mean, these days, lots of folks are living to 90, 95, 100. There's more people over 100 today in the world than there ever was in the past by far. And a lot of those people are living super healthy lives. I've seen so many 95-year-olds that are crystal clear minds and very, very capable. But guess what? They don't get there if they did something really stupid when they were 80. and got involved in trying to do something they just didn't need to do, right? Because for most of the folks that we're dealing with in this regard, they don't need to do it. They have options. They can hire professionals like the people in this room that are professionals at a company like ours. There's lots of options, right? You don't need to slug all this yourself. And you don't need to worry about the economics. Too often people say, oh, well, I can't afford to have somebody get my sales set up because, that's going to put my stuff net upside down at the end. Well, guess what? Net upside down might be okay if it saves your life. And if it was also done in a transparent, pragmatic way that met all those other obligations, right? Because the professional organizer, if they come on the scene, they're not magic. They can't make stuff, they can't make gold plate into solid gold. Okay. They got to deal with what you got. And what you got is what you created. And by the way, if you're an individual and you got a whole lot of stuff, another way to think about it is today is my problem to figure out this stuff. If I want to hire somebody, I want them to make it their problem. And so if somebody who's a professional or intermediary is going to think about making it their problem, it has to become their problem on terms that make sense to everybody, right? So I need everybody who's thinking about the sale of stuff. Sure, think about value. It's important. Think about price, think about cost, but try to keep everything in context, right? Because it's all important to keep everybody alive and safe, okay? All right, so because here's a little auction where the things are allotted, right? And these are allotted by shelves, right? But it didn't begin this way. I mean, it was a hoarder house before it started, and there were a lot of things happen, right? So those of you on the webinar that have been through stuff, and then to do a MaxSold sale, sometimes there's a convenient way to do stuff as well, where stuff is organized and you just kind of need to flag it, right? And it looks a lot tidier once it's cataloged. So now I'm actually going to talk a little bit specifically about MaxSold and MaxSold performance, okay? Because I think a lot of people feel like, well, here's the truth, okay? MaxSold was built to answer a need. What do I do with all this volume in a finite amount of time that's safe, transparent, fair, green, arm's length, etc.? And in that context, it's easy for us to slip into the idea that, oh, well, but you shouldn't sell valuable stuff there because, I can sell that to the silver dealer, I can sell that to the car dealer, I can sell that whatever else. I'm just going to show you a few things on performance for MaxSold, okay? So let's just think about these things. And I'm not going to dwell a ton on these slides. I just want to highlight a few things. So these are some individual sale items, and I just highlight a few items, okay? So there's a chandelier that sold for $2,700, and these are all reasonably recent sales, okay? $10,000 for a piano, $2,300 for some jewelry, $1,000 for a vase, $2,100 for some china, $4,200 for a pretty poor painting example, $17,000 for a car, and $10,000 for a Taylor Swift package with floor tickets. How's that? But those are just some broad examples of individual items. And then here's some collective sale results, okay? So the column that says GMV, this is auction gross. So there's a $43,000 auction. It had 293 lots and 139 items or bidders. And now think about this too. You saw some of those pictures of those live auctions, right? So at a live auction, if you got 139 people at a live auction, you got 60 or 70 bidders. Because guess what happens is people show up and they share a bidder number. So you got so you don't have that many bidders, right? You get half as many bidders. In an online auction, you get 139 bidders, you get 139 bidders, okay? That's like 250 people bidding on your stuff on your lawn, if you imagine it. 100% of the stuff sold. The average item value was $147. This next one, 424 lots, 225 bidders, $30,000. The next one, 28,000, the next one, 28,000. Think of these things, 100% sold, 96% sold, 99% sold, 91 and 99. I can tell you the 91 on that would have been a lower volume sale of individual items and a few higher value things. Here's some more even, and these are recent statistics as well, okay? 352 lots, $90,000, 725 bidders. Imagine 1,500 people in a room bidding on your stuff, 100% sold. $256 average lot value. Okay, $70,000, 135 bidders, 95% sold, $58,000, 605 bidders. Think of 1,200 people standing on your lawn or in your living room bidding on your stuff, 100% sold. $50,000, 158 bidders, 100% sold, 100% sold, 98% sold. Okay, Now we just go through some slides, some broad range, so you can see how some of these results manifest. And you may say to yourself, listen, I've sold Pyrex bowls before and they didn't bring $250. Well, I'll tell you what would have been different in this auction when the Pyrex bowls brought $250 is a whole lot of the other stuff in this auction was pretty interesting too. Okay. When you see a slide that says vintage women's clothing for $211, you know that this had a lot of high volume of very, very good things, quality things. Okay. And they were all kept in the auction. This wasn't an auction that was filtered out where they said, okay, look, we're going to sell this great item there and this great item here and this great here, and see how little interest we can generate in our own auction. That's called shooting yourself in the foot. Okay. So if you've got a nice group of things, and that's not to say that there aren't things that are better sold in a global audience. I always tell people, think of the audience as a global audience versus a local audience or regional audience. So if you're in a city like Toronto or Los Angeles, there are millions of bidders on your doorstep. Okay. For most things you want to sell, you don't really need a global audience, but there are some things that you would want a global audience for, and you'd want, so there are reasons for everything. Okay. But we'll just flip through some slides, right? Here's a diamond brooch for $4,600. Here's an acrylic painting for $5,000, right? A pair of speakers for $4,600. Like, I don't know musical stuff that well, but I can tell you this would have surprised me a whole lot. $4,600. And then here's a mix of things, right? We got a cymbal for $400. You got a PlayStation for $375. You got Nintendo stuff at $400. Look at this lot for a second. Here's a lot that brought $3,500. A lot of little leather brown books. It's interesting. $3,500. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary. Okay. Gold coins. Well, we can't see too much. I haven't got all the lot pictures there, just what you see, but $5,700. But coins, lots of demand for coins, of course. Okay. There's the $10,000 piano. There's this Taylor Swift tickets. We don't need to look at them too close because we kind of know what Taylor's doing. But you can sell anything in an online auction, a volume auction where you've got all the stuff, right? And this is an estate, and the guy had some tidy stuff, right? He had a truck, he had a tractor. This is a different sale at $5,200 for their flatware. And then more lots again. These are all examples of stuff that happens every day at MaxSold, as well as the more modest stuff. That's a repeat slide, actually. There's a fluid form bike for $1,600. Okay. Some speakers for $1,000. A giant Defy advanced bike for $1,700. A Patek Philippe watch, folks, for $13,000. That's a bit unusual even in MaxSold, but it just shows you. I mean, the crowd was there for it. And this, I can tell you without knowing specifically, this lot would have been sold in an auction where there was a whole lot of other valuable stuff from a valuable household. So people could see not just the Patek, but they could see that this person who is this estate had all of this stuff, right? So it adds legitimacy, right? It's not like somebody in New York City street corner selling a watch and he's got 19 of them on his wrist. I mean, this gives the authenticity to it, right? More stuff as well. A Tiger makeable harvest table. That's nice. $1,800, $770 for the drop leaf table, right? Beautiful. Some sculpture there, $1,000. Square quilt for $550, right? Nice quilts. Okay. We saw some of that stuff in a different slide as individuals, but more things in that sale as well. So lots of things, folks. This is just broad examples of stuff that gets sold in MaxSold on a regular basis, right? And so we sell whatever you have, right? MaxSold sells whatever you have. So if it's, you've got a modest household and it's $3,000 or it's $5,000 worth of total stuff, that's okay. We build that every day, but I could show you that stuff all day, every day. Not as many people get a chance to see this. And that's why I'm highlighting these slides today, is to just show you that it's all possible. Okay. $281 for the little vintage typewriter. Okay. And now I just want to spend a few minutes where we get 7 minutes left before the hour. And we will answer questions if there's some questions there. I see some people in the chat. I'm just going to tell you, if you're an individual, okay, and you really want to do a deep dive on how to downsize, then I'm just going to give you an option. We just built this course a month ago, and we just spoke about it for the first time a week ago. And just to give people the option, because we know that not everyone in North America is a fit for the kind of service that we provide, but you may be interested in learning how to make it all work, right? So we built a course that is called Downsizing Done. And this is a book that I wrote called Avoiding Chaos. And it's all about these situations, 8 discussions you need to have for a stress-free downsizing, okay? So for property owners, that's what we're up to. But so here's a little bit about the course. And later, okay, I'm going to give you a slide that's got a QR code. If this is of interest to you, you're welcome to snap on the QR code. There's 2 things on that QR code. One is you can register for the course. The other is if you just want to ask some questions, talk about something, you can book a meeting with me. So both of those things are on that QR code. So here's the course. Day 1, easy find and easy move. The moving sequence, how to choose what to keep and how to make a move, okay? Day 2, easy contents clear. Values, sale of goods options, what's best. We'll make a deep dive on all kinds of stuff. And this stuff, folks, is meant to be like in a meeting format where you can ask questions as we go. So there'll be lots of give and take and you can learn about things. Day 3, easy home sale. You as a power seller, how to get a great price when you want to sell it, understanding the marketplace, security, staging, inspections, closing, lawyers, all that kind of stuff. And we'll put a lot more meat into this program. It's going to be 3 90-minute sessions, 3 60-minute sessions with 30 minutes of discussion, 3 days in a row. And it's going to be September 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Okay. So it's open to anyone. It's based on, we've put it together. We got 50 years experience. Our experience is really unique. Okay. We're experts who guide people through these elements every day. We sold over 1 million items, personal property. We sold thousands of houses for downsize and estate clients. We got a unique understanding of the elements of these things. Okay. So if you, for those who want to know a lot more about how to downsize, but really don't want to hire a done for you solution, the kind that we provide, then this course might be something of interest. So if you're downsizing in the future, you got a family member who is, and you want to stay in the exploring stage for a while, if you want to find just searching for answers on the web is too complicated, there's too much conflicting information. If you want to be able to discuss questions in a group setting, for others who are in a similar place that you are, it's not for those who just want it done for you. You can hire folks around this room. You can hire me any day, right? There are other people in the room that are excellent at what they do, by the way, and spread all over different areas of the country. You can look for them. By the way, NASA members, POC members, NAPO members. So those are things that you want to look up if you're looking for people, and you want to find folks in those broad professional categories that do online auctions if you're interested in this stuff. And you'll be able to move forward with confidence in this course and your decisions, knowing a lot more about the right options for you for the big downsize. So you don't want to make a big mistake. Like every day, folks, I get phone calls from people who are halfway. I had one today at 4 o'clock from a lady she's doing everything backwards. She's squeezing herself into a vice, and she's got a couple of real estate agents who are helping her do it that don't understand. They're not bad people. They're going to sell her house for sure. They're just helping inadvertently to create a pressure cooker that's going to put a whole bunch of pressure on her. So anyway, you'll be able to move forward, spend a little, and learn how to stay safe. So it's going to be September 4th, 5th, and 6th from 10 to 11:30 Eastern time. The regular price that we had set was $497 for anybody today in the webinar. Tuition's $297. We're going to guarantee your satisfaction. If you don't find value after completing the 3-day sprint, we're going to refund it to you. No questions asked. And this is Canadian money, by the way. So if you're American, it's a little less money. So if you register for the course and decide to move up to done for you service, then we'll credit that. So if you take the course and you decide you wanted to hire our service later, we'll just throw the $295 against whatever the package that you take from us. We're also discounting today in appreciation for your attending. So really appreciate people spending the hour with us here and even a little bit more. This first time the course is being offered. Well, we just started. And it's almost certainly going to cost more in the future if we stay at this. Okay. And there are other professionals in the crowd that do lots of similar things as well. So there are professionals here today, I'm sure, that do various versions of consulting. And I encourage you to look into any of it because the key is to stay safe, make good choices. First 25 people that sign up are going to get a free copy of my book, Avoiding Chaos. You saw that earlier. For people that are just anxious and want to read it, you can download it from Audible and just listen to it and put it in the car and listen away you go. It's about 4.5 hours. So don't take the path of mistakes and learning by the school of hard knocks. Okay, the school of hard knocks is for kids, not for us. Okay, people that want an option, the option is here for them. Makes good sense. The course is open to anyone. There's the value. and question and answer each day, September 4th, 5th, and 6th at 10:30. There's a barcode for it. Cesar, if you have questions, I can stay longer. I know it's 6:59, but I'm not in a rush to get out of here. If there are questions that you want to deal with, I'm happy to deal with them. I'll just leave this screen up and people can have a look at it if they want. And they're welcome to do one of two things. They can either sign up for that course or they can book a meeting with me if they want to do that.
Well, we have lots of questions for you, and we'll try and get to a bunch of them. Real quick, the final code word is auction, and I'll put that in the chat here. So the 3 code words today were downsizing, estate, and auction. And anybody who needs a certificate of attendance, I will put my email here, and you can email me, heather.dawson@maxsold.com, and share those code words, and I'll send you a certificate. To get to the questions, we have a few. Okay, Pavlina's asking, what if the items are not high value? I guess she's thinking about what she wants to include in a sale.
Yeah. So listen, we built it to solve the problem, and we've sold like half bins of dishwasher soap. You don't want to build a sale around that, right? A sale of dishwasher soap isn't going to attract a whole lot of bidders unless it's a warehouse at a Target store and you're selling the whole department. But for households, you can sell almost anything that anyone else would have some use for in the context of, I got to clear all this stuff. So what doesn't work well in an online auction from the house is I got 5 things, I got 8 things, I got 20 things. It wasn't built for that. It was built to sell everything you can't take. So what I usually tell people is if you've got 30 or 40% or more of everything that you lived with, then there's probably an auction there. There's probably an online auction because you need to get rid of that volume in some pragmatic, practical way. And they don't have to be the highest. And by the way, I talked about not cherry picking and selling off the Sterling to this guy and the garden tractor to that guy, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't always keep the things that are most important to you. So if it's an estate or if it's a downsize, for sure, keep the things that you love and you have room for. But if you love them and you don't have room for them, there are better options in the storage locker, in my view, and that can be included in the sale and sell it.
Okay, Alex has a question here, Barry. I think it's probably a question for Gordon's and how Gordon's leverages MaxSold to be successful. He says, I've been selling on MaxSold since 2017 and done many auctions with them. MVP seller, but I've never seen an auction generate 90,000. He wants to know what is it you're doing to get these bigger sales and generate these bigger bids? What can he do to do what you're doing?
First of all, let me say that not all of those sales were sales that I had done. They were all sales that MaxSold has done. Okay. Some of them were, but I won't distinguish one from the next, et cetera. The largest sale that I've had personally on MaxSold is 225,000. We didn't have that. It was an older sale, so we didn't use it as an example right now. But we're more often in the spot where people are at the everything stage. And so what I mean by that is it's an estate or it's a downsize and they've got it all. We're typically called before they've done a ton of other things with it. And too often, I think people get into the phone call after people have made some decisions. They've decided that, like, the most common things are the automobiles. Okay. We have an estate that we're dealing with that the first conversation with the estate trustee is, well, there's a collector car and this other car, but she said, I can look after the sale of those. And I said, look if we're going to be there doing an event anyway, why not include them? And so she said, oh, you can do that. And I said, sure. Right. Well, so there's, in that particular case, that's probably $15,000 or $20,000 added to that particular event. Right. Sometimes there's gold, right? There might be $5,000 or $8,000 of the gold, but you didn't hear about it because they took it to the gemologist already. Right. So it's getting in early and it's asking all those questions. And one of the questions is there anything else that you didn't show me? Because you may have thought that it's not a good idea to have in this conversation. So those are some tips.
Excellent. There are a couple questions about how the buyers get their items. Do we ship them? Where do they go? So I guess some people on here aren't familiar with local pickup, local bidders.
Yeah. So the problem, and I know there's a nuance to this question, but the problem that MaxSold was built to sell or to solve was, what do I do with all my stuff when I need to have the house empty, et cetera, downsize or estate, generally speaking. And we were in the business when you saw some of those early slides. We sold from warehouses where we were selling online and live. So the live bidders were in the room, the online might have been in Australia. And what we found is that the bulk of stuff that we were shipping for one bid less, it would have been paid for today and picked up today. And the buyer knew what he got and he was happy. You ship it, now it's 3 weeks down the road. And the person gets it and you don't know if they're legit or not. And maybe they want to send you back one just like it and say, hey, it was broke when I got it. So the buyer pickup at the site is a key important part. Now, having said that, okay, there are examples of resellers, and some of them may be in the room today, that have a station or a place that they can work from, that they take the items from the house to, and that puts them in a spot where they can maybe deal with shipping. So you will see in MaxSold auctions a little now, we're in a trial stage where there's a bit of that going on. So, but look closely at the vent, the volume, think about what it was built for the first time. And the thing that I contend is the garden house is worth, hard hose is worth as much to the person next door as it is the person in California.
That is true. So let's see if there's any other questions here. Deb Lawrence, one needs to factor in the cost of organizer or another pro to clear out, organize, set up all the lots. It could be hundreds to thousands of dollars. Is there a cost to remove remaining items that didn't sell? She's asking about.
Yeah. So generally speaking, let me do a couple of frames. So I'm not going to be, I can't speak for everyone in the industry. But I would say to you, just to toss something out, that it's not, I've never seen $100,000 organization bill. As a matter of fact, I would expect you'd find that well under 10,000 is a much more common number. And maybe it's well under. It depends on how much is there and what you have, right? There are situations that are pretty much ready to catalog. You don't have to have an intermediary for every single sale. I mean, I've seen houses where people have got a china cabinet with 9 things in it. And every one of those 9 things, you just poke the camera, you just open the door, poke the camera in, take a picture, put a lot on it. And MaxSold can do some things like sell all of the pots and pans as a lot rather than spend a lot of time breaking them up. So not every, MaxSold does all kinds of auctions where they just photograph it and catalog it and sell it right from raw. But if it does take organization, if you do have to sort some stuff out, then there's a cost to do that, right? And just as I'd said earlier, the situation that you have, you own it right now, and you need somebody to help you solve it. And it is what it is, and it costs something. And so interview a professional if you know that it's bigger than you can handle, and see what they say and see if you think it makes sense, right? And if they tell you it's going to cost 100,000 and it's a 4,000, it's a 3,500 square foot house, I mean, that sounds like it's kind of crazy, but I think you're going to find that it's not free. It's professional work, but it's also not in that stratosphere.
Okay. Sasha's asking, have we heard yet regarding whether MaxSold has a process for authenticating items? Is it best to just submit all the items or more and just, I guess, just what we think has value and sellable and see what happens?
So this gets into a nuance that I'd rather Cesar handle, maybe in a back and forth or you in an email. What you can tell is that there are some sellers that sell like that Patek watch, okay, that have earned a status with MaxSold or develop a relationship where they're going to stand behind the piece. And so they darn well get it figured out themselves. And you need to be in that spot in order to be able to do that, because MaxSold can't be in the spot where MaxSold is representing the item to be something. If you see a really valuable item, chances are it's a partner managed sale, and the partner is the person who's basically saying, look, this is what it is, and we know, and we've done this to authenticate it. Am I right around that, Cesar? I don't want to say anything that's off base.
Barry, you're right on point, actually.
Okay.
So if you have any questions regarding authenticating items, please reach out to your customer success manager or myself, Cesar at maxwell.com, and I can help you with that. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. I have one last question about appraisals. I know that that comes up a lot when you get in the home and somebody says, hey, my parents had a report, let me go get it. What are some quick things that family members, fiduciaries, organizers, move managers, whoever is handed that report, what are some quick things they need to maybe look for or could look for to know if it's helpful?
Yeah,
Or how
good.
do they know if it's helpful?
Good question. So the first thing to look at is what was the definition of value? Was it an insurance appraisal? Was it a fair market value appraisal? Was it an auction market value appraisal? And most often it's going to be an insurance value. And the reason that's the most often thing is because that's the most often reason why somebody who is not selling, okay, so remember they got this appraisal report probably some time ago. So if they weren't selling their stuff, why do they want it appraised? Well, most people are thinking, well, I want to keep it insured, right? So you insure something. I don't know how to make a short example of this, but here's a situation I've seen. Okay. You got a t-shirt that you paid $30 for, and you've worn it for 3 years and it's dirty and it's in a pile and you use it to clean the car now. That t-shirt's worth zero in fair market value terms. If your house burns, it might be worth $30. Okay. Because now it's replacement value. So that's the context. So when you look at a replacement value appraisal, the first thing you got to say is, look at this stuff probably doesn't make any sense at all. So let's talk about what might be real. So that's where that'd be where I start.
Okay, great. I think we have, well, let's see, one more question here. What is the key to auction lotting efficiently in a house that's filled with stuff? The goal, one of many I know. Is it to keep labor costs down for the client so they can make money?
Yeah, so this is the magic of the personal organizer. You got to do your best to get to the best end result, and it starts with doing your very best to understand what the seller's needs are. So some sellers, they want the best net result they can, and for that seller, you're going to look closely at things. You're going to try to harvest out the things that people need to see as individual items. So if there's a bit of like gems, right? Pull those things out, make sure that you've gotten those things out. And where you see boxes of stuff and you're confident or reasonably confident that that's just a bunch of stuff, there's the risk of there being anything in there that's worth much is really low. Then you just, put a lot number on it and say, listen, we're not pulling it all apart. We're going to call it a mystery lot. Back in the day, I can tell you, here's a fun game we used to play in the live auction business. Suitcases never sold. Nobody wanted to buy a suitcase in an auction in 1980. I promise you. You put some money in the suitcase. You didn't say how much it was. You just closed up the suitcase. You say, hey, here's a suitcase, but I promise you it's got money in it. Not going to tell you how much. People bid on it. It was a game. They buy it. But so anyway, that's kind of where I would go. But it really is, what's in the seller's interest? What are they trying to achieve? I had one more example in mind that went in a different direction, but I just forgotten it. So I'll skip it for now.
All right. I think, let me just double check the Q&A. I think that's it. I think we've got all the questions. Cesar, let me know if you see something I missed. But I think we've got it all. Thank you
Looks
so
good.
much, Barry.
Thank you.
Hey,
Barry.
thanks very much for everyone who put the time in and had a look. And if this course is interesting to you, by all means, sign up. My person who monitors this, by the way, is away for a couple of days. So if you sign up, you should get automatic confirmation of that kind of stuff. But I won't be able to check on those details because it's beyond my tech skill. But I appreciate coming in. I appreciate your interest. Thanks very much to Cesar and Heather for giving us a chance to host this. If you liked the seminar today and it was valuable, go ahead and throw a 1 in the chat. Just hammer some 1s in there, and they can use that as feedback. And if you have any other feedback, please, submit it along the way. And I think that Heather will be sending out a copy of this presentation probably. Is that right, Heather?
Yeah.
Yes, there will be a recording. By the way, Barry, someone asked if they want to buy your book, where can they get it?
I think Amazon or Apple Books, or if you want to listen to it on Audible.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone. Have a good night.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you, Barry.
Yeah.